found myself falling into a bit at the beginning. But the more I read about it, the more like the advice is use paragraphs, bullet points, and tables. So who hasn't been doing that? So that's where I get to with this stuff. That's why I'm a bit jaded. There's
Fair
definitely an over confusion. There's people who are profiting out of the confusion of people in the industry, I would say.
On today's episode, I'm joined by Clarkson Bennett. He's currently the SEO Director of The Telegraph, one of the UK's biggest publishers. It's currently consumed by over 27 million Britons. Previously, he had spent some time at Harvest Digital and MVF working as an SEO manager. Enjoy today's episode. I would love to know about your start. How did you get into SEO? Maybe you could give us an overview of your career and how you ended up being the SEO director of one of the biggest publications in the UK.
So I my brother ran a recruitment company when I first started working. I didn't really know what to do. So I got into recruitment because he knew someone who knew someone. And so, I could be a recruiter. I really hated that job. So I spent like 2.5 years trying to get out of that. I started getting a little bit interested in general marketing and I actually grifted my way into like SEO and e-commerce style job somewhere. Messaged someone on LinkedIn who worked for a publisher and said, I'd really like to do this. I don't know if you have any options coming up or openings coming up for SEO jobs or anything like that. And they said they did, and they really liked my attitude. The problem was that they didn't have anyone else in the company doing anything, and I didn't know anything. So I was blagging it for about 6 weeks until I think they realized I didn't know anything, and then got fired, which is awesome. Or maybe asked to leave. So I was like, okay, that's probably a bad move. I can't go back into that again. So I did a digital marketing course, which had like a bit of an SEO specialism in it, General Assembly, which was great. Then got a job at an agency off the back of that as an SEO exec, which was really good as well, in fairness. Then worked for a company called MVF, which was great fun, which was affiliate lead gen. We had loads of websites, kind of like the golden age of SEO, where you could be like, well, you just write anything and rank for it. This is amazing. And we did like waste management, type builders, like anything and everything. Sold leads, bit money. It was very good for a while. And then that became a bit more difficult. And then I got a job at a company called Yardlink. And that was just when COVID came in, and that was to be the SEO lead there. And I lost that job before I started it because they were like, oh shit, sorry, COVID, there aren't any construction yards opening. So luckily MVF kept me on. And then I joined an agency as the SEO director there. And then to my chagrin, left very quickly because the Telegraph, I got like someone basically headhunted me from a recruiter to be like, oh, do you want to be as a head of performance and SEO job at the Telegraph if you're interested? So I did that. And then after about a year, that was mainly on the commercial side. And after about a year, they opened up product. We created a product team. And then as part of the product team, they're like, oh, we're going to create an SEO director job. So I applied, interviewed, and here we are.
Wow. Quite the illustrious career. You sort of stumbled into it then. Was SEO on the forefront, or it was just sort of something that you were like, okay, this is interesting. This is something I think I could, master. Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever thought I'd master it or if I ever will, but I definitely I always like a bit of variety. Like I would say I'm sort of pretty good at everything without being that great at anything. Maybe apart from the like managing stakeholder side of things now, which I'm pretty good at, but I don't think I'm unbelievable at any of it. I think I'm just pretty good at everything. I think so. We're sort of like, I like data, but I'm not amazing with it. Well, I do like content and writing, but I don't know how much of that is kind of SEO specific now, but I always love that. I like the kind of creativity of it, and you do get exposure quite quickly to stuff. So for somebody who gets bored quite easily, it's a good career.
Nice. And it's a nice way to brand SEO, I feel, because you do need to know a little bit about everything. It is hyper specific, but it's also related to everything. So I think having a diverse skill set or like curiosity really helps in this career. So it's amazing to know that you were headhunted by the Telegraph. So it wasn't sort of, and also for those of you guys listening, the Telegraph is basically this huge multimedia company, publisher of print and digital media. They have their most well-known paper, I guess, the Daily Telegraph. And then there's also the Telegraph. And also you have very popular podcasts. So you're also doing very well on
Yeah.
YouTube. Um, I wanted to ask, as your job right now, you said that you have sort of gone into this role of being the SEO director for a um, the product team. What does that entail? What are you responsible for as an SEO director in a major publication? Is it all the public, is it all the written content, all the produced podcast content? Like how does that work? Maybe you could break it down.
So technically, I also moved from product to editorial quite recently. So we kind of gone around the houses as a team. But probably the best way of describing it is way our team is structured now beforehand is so I built a news arm of the team. News and evergreen content is so different. Like if you have someone, and even I found this starting, like I didn't have any experience in news or big publishers beforehand, but the newsroom can be like quite an intimidating place. It's big, it's fast, it's like you can't be shirking in that environment. And I think evergreen SEO and evergreen content is a bit slower paced. What you need is somebody who has like a real keen eye for detail, I think, wants to kind of love something over time. Whereas news is a bit more like get it out there quickly, make sure it's right to begin with, make it clickable, understand what events are coming up, understand there's such a difference between the two roles and like the pace that they work, and they're both, I think, really difficult in their own right. So we kind of split that to begin with so that we are the optimization of, I suppose, like newsy articles, i.e. headlines and images being the big two things, definitely falls on the news team, as does the kind of, I suppose, like the planning of event side of things, because obviously the paper plans its own events. But what we try and do is make sure that we have all the like foundational SEO content, you might call it, a paper lined up and ready to go. Then we have kind of the evergreen team, which is we have a lot of like evergreen specific desks or desks that do a lot more evergreen content. It might be like money desk or health or like the commercial arm of the business that just does a lot more evergreen content. So that's why we split the team up. And obviously we have a product review section of the website as well called recommended, which is very evergreen. So it made sense to split the team up. So we looked after those types of content and those types of desks differently, because obviously for publishers as well, like Discover's such a big source of traffic now for most that you do need a team that's in charge of that to some extent as well. And then we have a more like technical product and data arm of the team, which is our head of tech SEO called Svet. And then sort of me, him, and Joe and that team then look at the technical health of the website, like not just in terms of site speed, but like how efficient are we? Where's our crawl wastage? How's our navigation work? Does our internal linking line up with how we want the site to look and feel? All those kind of elements, I suppose. And then over the last maybe 6 to 12 months, obviously you have a lot more look at the autonomous nature of what we could do. And that, I think, has been a big learning curve for a lot of us to be like, right, okay, what could we be doing? How could we save ourselves time? What could we be, maybe saving time is wrong, but how can we create something that delivers something that's better quality whilst like freeing up our time to look elsewhere? So in that sense, we're not directly in charge of any content, really. That's always on the desk. The desks have their own targets. We are judged against that. We're judged on a wider page view target from search. Otherwise, there's almost too many stakeholders for each individual thing. So the desks have their own run of things. What we do is like plug in and support all different desks. What I would see us as like maybe an internal agency is a good way of looking at it at a paper.
So you kind of have also your like, I'm not to say code of conduct, but like sort of the briefs that then go on, or like to these desk teams on how they should create the content, but you don't involve yourself to it day to day. You sort of audit to make sure that you're following the best practices, but then you're sort of involved in the more like technical upkeep of making sure that, all the technical SEO points, like you said, making sure it's crawlable, and the pages, like what's the page view like, etc. Things that you have control of day to day.
Exactly.
I was trying to understand, like, for such a huge publication, like how does one sort of like, prioritize SEO? There's so many elements, like you said, ranking for evergreen content versus what maybe the Telegraph is known for, which is news content, like, short-lived. It's different, so diverse. I actually wanted to ask you a question about, you're saying that over the past 6 months, the focus has then been on basically how to alleviate the workload, or I would assume work hand in hand with AI, right? To make your lives a lot easier. What changes have you made to the team, and like for your workflow? How have you sort of like also incorporated AI in a major publication? Aren't there also restrictions with privacy, etc.? Like, how is the adoption of AI
Yes.
been in your team and in the company?
So there are obviously privacy concerns generally. So there are regulations around what we can and can't do with AI. And there are certain standards that we would have around AI, around not using it to create content. So we've trialed it, like lots of publishers have trialed it, doing things like text to voice, doing things like summaries at the top of articles, but you get kind of 3 key points. I think the issue with that other publishers have found before we did, I think, was actually kind of the accuracy and validity of what gets pulled through into the key points of the articles. We are using it. So we also have a kind of Gen AI team in the business who we work with on lots of this stuff. So lots of things in big publishers, there's always a lot of red tape. So what we try and do is own as much as we can in our team. And then when we have to work with other teams to get something pushed through, then obviously we will do. But most of the time it makes more sense, unless there's something very specific that the website or the CMS needs. We try and own things internally. So as an example, an internal linking automator that's being built at the minute, because the internal linking at the minute, particularly on news articles or stuff, is like, people don't have the context of what's come before, what's going to come afterwards. People don't have that, like, the sort of built-in memory that someone who's worked in SEO for a long time has. You're like, oh, I see we have this content or this suite of content. We will remember this for the future. We'll know to link to it. These are our important pages. Like, it's just when you're publishing hundreds of articles a day, that sort of stuff doesn't really filter through to teams who are like, we just need to get this out there. So the linking becomes a bit frantic or frenetic. So you try and build something that's like relatively straightforward, but like similarity scores based on text, tokenization models. How can you figure out what should link to where? And then instead of automatically inserting the link, it serves some prompts as to be like, you could link to these 5 pages in this text. So that's kind of a version 1. And that's like a good CMS upgrade that we need to make. And then in our team, I suppose what we've been playing around with is like the key things we want to look at is the automation of reporting. Obviously, it's a big publisher, loads of desks. You could be doing 10, 15 reports a week plus for people. And they're not massive, but it's still a lot of time. And things like briefing, the fundamentals of stuff where we look at and go, we do a lot of this. Really, we should be able to automate most of this. To some extent, then with some human oversight, that's sort of what we're working towards. I don't think there's anything incredible we need to do. Sort of the big project that we want to do is connect our BigQuery data from Search Console with whichever like API or MCP server we need to create something. I don't want to say agentic, but to create something that allows us to automate the analysis at scale, which is kind of in the same vein as reporting, but like how can we use all this data we have around like positional trends, URL trends, clicks, impressions? How can we like categorize keywords into intent or specific types of categories? For us, could be news, royal family, whatever it might be, so that we can get a look at when things start trending down at like a macro and micro level over time. Because that's obviously the big issue with these sites is you have millions of pages. You're just never going to know exactly what's happening. So you kind of need to work out what you need to care about and then hone in there and then just go, do you know what, the other stuff is kind of like, it's a bit by the by. So that's where we're trying to get to. There's like some simple, good automations that we can do to begin with that improve workflows, give people more time. And then there's some bigger stuff where we're like, if we can create a data workflow that's a little bit autonomous in nature and just allows us, again, just to ask questions in a flowing nature to go, right, what's dropping off here, or get automated, or get a notification when like a specific category or type of intent drops off in specific areas, like that's super useful. So that's where we want to get to. And in terms of changes to the team, I think I'm quite lucky in that the people I have in the team are A, excellent, and B, a couple of people who are really interested in vibe coding, AI generally, like so I haven't had to make big changes. And I don't think I would have done anyway. Like the stuff we've always done has been, what we did was good 6 months ago and it's still good now. It doesn't mean that we can't change it or improve it, but there's not wholesale changes to make. There's just like sensible tweaks, I would say.
I see. And I very quickly want to ask, why the apprehension of using the word agentic? Because it does sound like a lot of the tools that you want to create internally could be executed by an AI agent. What's your personal opinion on that?
It definitely could do, and there's nothing wrong with using it. I'm very jaded. And that I do think is a real problem, is I am tired of all of this at the minute because it's moving so quickly. So I don't want to sit here and say that we're doing all this amazing stuff because look, it's hard and we are getting somewhere for sure. It's just going to take some time. And whether it becomes agentic or not, I'm not sure, because it will be quite difficult to do. And it is a huge data lake that we're talking about here. So it requires more than just our team to be able to make it work, which is where things can get a bit tricky in places where everybody is a lot of red tape, people are super busy, you need like access, and it's just not very fast. So it's not wrong for me to call it that. It just slightly gives me the ick.
Totally understand. And you're saying that, yeah, there's lots of red tape. So you do have these very ambitious projects of sort of like using, and you also see the use case of how AI can very much improve the day-to-day of your team, from reporting to internal linking. So, making people more autonomous so that,
Yes.
you know what works, but making it easier for editors, publishers, people that are publishing this content to do their work. Yeah, it's really amazing seeing how things can be improved. But obviously, there are setbacks because of all the restrictions. And you're saying that you're looking to possibly work. I mean, it's something that you can't sort of just do internally. You would have to work externally as well. Are you then working with agencies or or purchasing tools to try and see if you can sort of like build this out yourself? And also, yeah, utilizing the Telegraph's huge data set, because you have so much internal data, content data that needs to be sort of categorized. Like how are you planning this big projects, actually, the workflow?
To start with, just like a really simple, I say simple, theoretically quite simple, right? Of just being like, this is where we are, this is where we want to get to, this is why. So we need it. It's like a bit of almost like a bit of a flow chart of like evergreen content, news content, our audience, technical side of things, the product side of things that we work on. We're trying to connect all of that together to look at, like you said, the tools that we have, what we can do with those based on where we want to get to, and then the tools that we probably need to be able to get to that point. And part of it might be that we need like someone that we can host things that we've built and created internally, just as like lots of this stuff is kind of proof of concept work that we need to do. So I've grown quite fond of vibe coding, but I really see I actually do really like it as an interesting way of spending time and trying to solve problems. But I can really see the more you use it, the more I'm like, if stuff goes wrong, it's not easy to solve when you don't know what you're doing. So we need a bit of a sort of testing ground. We need access to some really good APIs, like Google Trends API, or Google Trends have just launched their API, which is great because that's the kind of thing that we need. If you can map that external data with your internal data, if we can start to see categories of content going down when we can see them going up in trends, we know that there's something wrong. And without those two things blended together, we don't see that. There's lots of problems we want to solve to get to the final point, which I think for us is a bit like, how do we create content that really speaks to our audience as like an end goal of saying, we want to steer a conversation, we want to lead a conversation, and it needs to really speak to our audience. For us, I do think it's that mapping of internal and external data that's really important for us to be able to get to, so that we can see when things start to trend on our site, maybe in the comments section, maybe in site search, and externally as well, so we can try and be ahead of the game. And then I think there's this sort of other bits that we need to be able to, like I said, which is like just making the team a bit more efficient and giving people more time. But again, having spent quite a lot of time vibe coding and figuring this stuff out, it's like, it's way quicker just to do the stuff without trying to vibe code a project or figure something out. It's taken like weeks to do a few. And I'm obviously not working on them full time, but like they're difficult to get right actually, and to do really well. I was going to say, so I think I kind of understand the pitfalls and the pros and cons of doing this stuff quite well, and where we get to. But it is super interesting. It just is tiring.
In order to know what you're doing, whether you can improve things, you have to sort of like go and break things and see if it's actually going to be more efficient. And sometimes the outcome, by creating your own workflows, working with these MCPs, vibe coding, etc., like there's no certainty that these are time spent on this is actually going to sort of be implemented at scale. Because like you said, sometimes it's easier to just do things as they've been done before. So what advice do you have for people that are working in SEO that are sort of seeing all the advancements in the industry that can supposedly make their lives easier, and how do they sort of like incorporate that into their work and justify maybe to to their team, to their bosses? Because in these bigger corporations there's more red tape for experimentation, right? Like how do you sort of get away with trying to experiment with what you want to do?
I think the most important thing, like generally in SEO at the minute, is just like cutting through the noise, because people are still getting really good results out of search. And frankly, for us, like traffic that comes through LLMs is pitiful. they're just not platforms that are ever going to send us much traffic, particularly as a publisher. Like, is it still valuable being present there? Probably. But do we see anything of value at the minute? No. So for us, like cutting through the noise of being like, all right, I actually don't care about this for a while because I have quite a finite amount of energy to give. And whilst AI is like real buzzword for everybody and really important for C-suite, I think just being able to concretely sit there and say like, look, for us, traditional search is still so many hundreds of times bigger than this that it really doesn't make a huge amount of sense for me to spend time on this source of traffic is a good starting point. I think you really are going to be quite reliant on like the more senior people in your team to set you up in a way that allows you to be more efficient, because it's not fair to ask somebody who's like in the day to day in the weeds of stuff to also be like, oh, why don't you try and vibe code this? Or why don't you figure out a way to automate? It doesn't work like that. Like it's not, you need people with enough experience to be able to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to set aside some time for us as a team to things up and fail a bit and like not quite get it right. And we might spend 2 months trying to figure out how to do a specific data integration project or to create something that might vaguely be resembling an agentic product. And it might not work. And you kind of have to be okay with that because it's rarely completely wasted. And we sort of know we need to get there in the future. So I think the general advice is to try and ignore most of the bullshit, to try and really focus on the areas. Like if you're more junior, I think the best thing that you can do is just identify problems that you have. And I think that's always been the thing. Most of the time I'd be like, bring the solution with the problem. But I think in this case now, if you don't know the solution, it's cool to be like, listen, I'm spending a ton of time doing this. I'm writing 50 briefs a week or whatever it is. I really feel like my time could be better spent. Then we can solve that problem in quite an interesting way now. So that's what I think.
That's really sound advice. Crowdsourcing the solution. You don't need to sort of just bring the problem and the solution, because now there's so many different solutions and everyone's sort of like experimenting on their own and with different departments as well when you're in a bigger organization, right? So there's ways to find a way to build something new that works. So you were saying that you're not seeing any significant traffic uptick from LLMs for the publication. Is that then, are you then keeping it as business as usual, or are you sort of also finding ways to sort of optimize your content for LLMs? Like, are you making use of any not retail, I keep saying retail, but any AI analytic tools, like these LLM analytic tools?
So we have been using Profound as a bit of a trial. But yeah, look, I'll start by saying we get no traffic from this stuff. So we do block them, but there is context to us now blocking all of them, is that most of them is that, like, we've only done that for the last couple of months. But beforehand, it was the traffic was still tiny, right? Like, they're just not platforms designed to send traffic. They're platforms designed to answer the question in the platform, kind of like all the other platforms, but at an even worse scale than ever before. So I do think that we use them all the time in various guises, or I do, and they're great, but they do have actually, interestingly, like even the quality of traffic we've seen for them has not been very good in terms of conversions, which is kind of counter to what most people have been discussing. So I'm skeptical of how useful they'll ever be for publishers, because I just don't think they'll send that traffic. But where I think there is some good value that we've seen so far with Profound, which is a really nice tool. I really like the user interface with all of these things. What I like is that they have which I think Ahrefs Brand Radar does as well, the kind of sentiment side of things, right? Where you can see like how your tool is, how you are viewed as a product, as a service, what the main pitfalls are. And basically, they're all crawling the same and referencing the same like 5 pages around Trustpilot, other third-party review sites. What, like, if you're a publisher, like what someone who does like fact checking or like bias reporting will say. And it's always been, this is why I just don't think it's very different to SEO. It's just, there's very few differences. Is that like, we've always thought that it would be important for search to have good reviews. So it's always been in the back of your mind to be like, that'll probably help with search, just in the same way that like having a strong social account would help with search. But you've never had to do it in search because it's always been easy enough to generate the traffic that you've needed. And that's a bit like, if we ever get around to there, fine, but we can't put a value on it. Whereas now I think it's a bit easier to define a value to it. And it's a bit easier to work with like a brand and marketing team to sit there and say like, do you know what, like for us, we really could answer questions on like our pricing, which we don't do very well, or like customer service, like the help center. I think there are areas that we can now add more value around owning our branded search, which again, we just never had to do. We should. It's never kind of been forced on us. But now I have a way of saying to C-suite, to senior people, like, look, this is this is how we are viewed by something that has eaten everything the internet has to offer. Like, this is just what people say about us. So I think that's quite an interesting area of LLM tracking and visibility. But broadly, I think when you only have quite a small number of prompts that you're simulating, and it's not like I know what people are prompting or anyone does, I'm just not sure of the value that these tools will have in the future. And I think they're quite expensive for what they are, if I'm honest. So I think at the minute it's useful for us to get a view and a steer on like how things are and what's happening. I'm not sure this is like, I don't know if people are going to be spending like thousands of pounds a month on this in the future to be like, we have 2% simulated visibility in something. And that's not a knock on any of the tools or anything. That's just kind of what I think of for a publisher. I'm just not sure there's huge value in it. But maybe I'm wrong.
But interesting that you said that a lot of what these analytics tools are telling is that, you know, you sort of need to spread yourself across all mediums, right? Like sort of have your PR, doing PR essentially, and working together with other departments as well to sort of like have that, to get your share of voice up across all mediums. Like you're no longer just able to capitalize on Google, you need to spread yourselves elsewhere. So if anything, I would assume SEOs have to be a bit more they're digital marketers now, right? Like it's sort of going back to the principles of marketing a bit, or do you have any opinions on that? Because SEO is not dead; it's just becoming.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, but I think the problem I have with, so I completely agree with that. Like I think being a good marketer is like kind of a fundamental of SEO, and I don't think it's had to be that for a long time again, because I think it's quite easy just to generate some informational content and to be like, wow, look, we've got whatever 100,000 clicks a month or whatever from a couple of articles about solar panels. I used to work on a solar panel site. That's why I use that as an example. But like, is that going to be the future? Probably not. And I don't disagree with the idea that informational content can be answered, like pretty basic queries can be answered without clicking through to a publisher's site. I kind of think that's fair enough. I'm not a huge fan of AI overviews, but I understand the point in lots of areas of being like, do people want to have another click to find out some pretty basic information? I guess the issue is the validity and accuracy of the information, which I think is always going to be an issue with this stuff. So I don't disagree with that as kind of like as a function of what we're trying to do or what they are trying to do generally. So what was the question? I was just blithering about AI overviews again.
No, it was just like your opinion on like how SEOs, you know, the.
Oh, sorry. Yes. No, that's a good one.
Yeah, but I think you agree with the fact that you do need to sort of get away with things in the past by just sort of hyper focusing on like optimizing for Google.
It's got to be people first and audience first. And that again will be, which sounds strange in like an LLM agent era, but like really, if you're a publisher particularly, if you're not people first, I think you're done. Like if you're not creating interesting stuff that helps you stand out, I'm not sure you're going to survive in the other era. But I think if you do that and you're a publisher with a big user base and you have a strong voice, I think there's plenty of space. And I think, you know, a lot of publishers probably will die and that will be sad, but that will open opportunities. And what this will do is open opportunities. It's like the money will be there somewhere, I think. I think that, to be honest with you, I think a lot of smaller publishers will just get ironed out. And I think unless you're like unless you've got enough to survive and enough diversity to survive and a brand that's strong enough, like you said earlier about digital PR, unless you figure out a way to grow that stuff and to like solve your audience's problems, like SparkToro, I think is quite a cool tool for this kind of stuff, where you can see where your audience spend time and what they do. And the platforms they use, I think is really interesting. That's something that we've been trying to do a little bit more of as well. But yeah, I think loads of publishers will struggle. I think some will figure it out and do really well. Probably the nature of the beast.
Nice. Very quickly, I want to ask, like, what are some of your favorite tools currently? Because you mentioned SparkToro, you're testing Profound, the analytics tool for LLMs. What do you currently have on rotation in your tool stack?
So we have Ahrefs is like our big all-encompassing tool. We're using Profound at the minute. We have currently Lumar, but we're moving to SiteGoal in a few months. Currently Lumar. Currently
okay.
we use Lumar, but we're moving to SiteGoal in a few months. Both very good, but we were just asked to save a bit of money, and that made sense. We have Briefing Tool. We have like 4 or 5 smaller tools that do. So we actually don't have. So we look at our keyword research options at the minute as one of the areas that we want to try and evolve. around like, how can we use our internal data? How can we also answer queries that are kind of platform agnostic, maybe a good way of describing it, but that we think are more relevant to our audience? So can we pull stuff from YouTube? Can we just figure out what the wider person is saying as opposed to just what people say on search? So we can try and get a better idea and understanding of what would make sense for our audience. So I think something like Keywords Everywhere will definitely be in discussions. We use SEO Stat as well, which I think is a brilliant tool. It hasn't quite worked perfectly for us, but I think if you're like an agency or you were somebody, even like just a consultant or anything, I think SEO Stat would be probably the first tool I would buy, just because it's such a good upgrade on Search Console. And then we have like a couple of, pro accounts for Gemini, Lovable we've been testing, but that's more like an individual testing side of things. We have a log file analyzer and a Screaming Frog, obviously. Like we have quite a few, but probably about 6 core ones. And then everything else we kind of make do with like the very cheap versions of things, build them ourselves, or like Chrome plugins.
Sorry, what is that? Trends plugins?
Chrome plugins. Sorry, I said Trends plugins, but I meant Chrome plugins. So they're like stuff like looking at JavaScript rendering and what's being rendered client side and server side. Like we can do that really well with some really good Chrome plugins that Tory Gray made recently. A really good one. I forget the name of, which is a shame. It's very good.
Cool. Thanks for that overview. I want to end it with actually a very quick rapid fire round of questions around Hill. So it's not one word answers, but it's one sentence. And of course, we can deep dive if you want to give more context to your answers. You've been dropping gems, so I totally welcome for you to go off and to share what you'd like with the questions. So I'll start with the first one. Do you use LLMs outside of work or just on the job?
Outside of work quite a lot, yes. Mainly for vibe coding purposes. If I ever need to work out like a statistical problem that I can't figure out, like my wife asked me, how likely is it if you rolled a dice, how likely is it that I won't roll a 1 in 2 goes? Christ, that's okay. I think this, and then have to check. So that kind of stuff. Yes, all the time.
Nice. We can now trust the math on these tools, right?
I think I could do it without the tool now if you ask me that specific kind of question again, but I'm not sure.
So which is your favorite LLM then, personally and professionally?
Well, we can't use ChatGPT at work because of the sharing implications. So we have Gemini Pro, which is like internal.
So because it's fairly recent, right? That finding out that like ChatGPT users are being shared.
I did see that, but that's not the reason. Like we're a Google partner, and I think if you have Gemini Business, Gemini Pro, like nothing is stored or shared. So anything you ask, obviously people will put things in that might be internal data or something about the company. So we use something where Gemini Pro, you don't have that access to do it. So Gemini Pro is definitely the one I use the most. I do use ChatGPT, but that's probably only out of work, and really because I have access to Gemini Pro. If I'm vibe coding or trying to come up with some ideas for stuff, that's definitely where I start because it's kind of richer, deeper. I can do more stuff with it. Tried Copilot for a while. I was going to get into Cursor, but then started using Lovable and was like, cool, I guess I don't need that, even though I think it would still add value. But really, it's probably like 80% Gemini Pro, I would say.
Nice. What's one SEO task you never want to do manually again?
Ooh, redirect mapping.
Okay. And most overhyped SEO trend in the AI era?
Chunking.
Chunking of articles and
it's just like writing in paragraphs. Yeah, it's a bizarre thing that people have. I absolutely found myself falling into a bit at the beginning. But the more I read about it, the more like the advice is use paragraphs, bullet points, and tables. So who hasn't been doing that? So that's where I get to with this stuff. That's why I'm a bit jaded. There's definitely an over confusion. There's people who are profiting out of the confusion of people in the industry, I would say. And that's unfortunately where we're getting to. Yeah. So I find that stuff irritating. So I think all of that can go. Just right for people not interested.
And what's your advice? This is taking a bit of a pause from the rapid fire round because I think it's important for you to maybe share some advice on some credible resources that people should follow so that they don't sort of fall victim to these, short-lived tags or like this AI SEO anxiety. Who are some of your favorites?
Barry Adams for sure. Yes, Schultz is excellent. And Petrovic, I really like. I think he got called the mad scientist a bit on LinkedIn, but he's just does so much interesting stuff with AI and LLMs, but has quite a good, I was going to say grounding. I will say grounding. Has a really good grounding in being like, it's all fine. They're a bit different, but it's broadly the same. There's lots of people. Mark Williams Cook, I think, is also a leader. I think there's loads of people who are very popular who are doing like a really excellent job in the industry of keeping people a bit more grounded. But it is, you are swimming against the tide of it. I probably get 10 messages a week from people selling me a LLM tracker or stuff where it's like, guys, you can't all be doing this. There's not enough space. It's not that interesting. That's what I get to. So there are definitely some people doing
Nice. Solid name. Cool. One AI feature on that note of like people selling you these LLM trackers. So probably not that, but what's one AI feature or product you wish existed right now?
Oh,
Maybe
I don't have one. The ones that I, so the ones that I, the things that I've always liked, no, not like doing, the things that have always pissed me off and taken too much time and have been really difficult to do is stuff like forecasting. Impossible to do well. Impossible. I'm not having it. There's no good way of doing this. I've been trying to vibe code an SEO forecasting tool, which I'll have for like paid subscribers if I can get it right, to my newsletter. But that's one thing that I've always felt is so difficult to do. In the old, you could, used to be able to put, here are some keywords, here's the rough click-through rate, blah, blah, blah. How are you doing that now? Like that's much, much more difficult now. So there's lots of stuff that I think market sizing, SEO forecasting, all things that you should be able to do pretty quickly with a couple of simple tools, which I have been vibe coding, but that I think are really so time consuming, so difficult to get right. And with forecasting, you want somebody who has like some kind of background in statistics to give you an idea about what model you should be using for this. Like, is your data very seasonal? Have more, should your more recent data be weighted higher? Obviously, in most cases, it should. Like, you do need somebody who knows a bit about this stuff. And I just don't think you ever get taught that in this industry. So something that makes it easier for people to do that kind of stuff that I think is really time consuming and really difficult to do well. Hopefully we can solve that, but it's pretty hard. So we shall see.
You might be the one to solve it. Maybe working hand in hand with like a data scientist to sort of like help with the statistical modeling.
Yeah,
might work.
exactly.
Yeah. AI agents, overkill or overdue?
I think they'll be able to do really cool things in the future. They probably already can now. We haven't figured it out yet, but people have done like WordLift, I think. Is it called WordLift?
An AI discovery tool?
I'm pretty sure it's WordLift, but basically they do some really cool stuff. Yeah, Andrea Volpini. I'm pretty sure that's WordLift. Yeah. Yes, WordLift. So basically they have it's kind of like a custom AI agent that bends into your business, understands all the entities that your business connects to, so all the different people, places, organizations, kind of builds you almost like a structured data map of your business. And then autonomously sits, it beds in with your data, it does stuff like we've been describing. That's amazing. I think it's really good. It is expensive, and it should be because it's a brilliant tool.
I see they're used by a lot of like also media companies. A company I used to work for, actually, the Next Web. So I guess for these bigger companies that have a lot of like content, a lot of data to sort of map out everything. Wow, pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's very cool. So there's some good stuff being done for sure. It's just hard to see all of it, I think.
Build or buy your AI workflow?
It definitely depends. Right now we are thinking build, but there's no reason why you couldn't just buy a very good one out of the box, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Harry. Please let the people know where to find you. I know you have a really good newsletter out there that you post to regularly. Please let how they can find you, how they can keep updated on your work in the Telegraph, but also probably what you're doing on the side.
LeadershipinSEO.com, no hyphens, all one word. A couple of free tools, hopefully be some paid tools on there. The content will always be free. People paying is great, but not like I'd rather giving stuff away for free and hopefully creating interesting stuff in the future, I think will kind of always be the goal. So just there. Super
nice. Yeah, look forward to you like cracking the code on the forecasting tool.
Don't hold your breath. I'll do my best.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harry. This was great. Like